Hi, and welcome to this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. I'm Joy Doreen Bira, and this conversation is centered on connecting African classrooms. We would like to find out what's inside Africa's game-changing partnerships. And the context here is that as Africa's education systems look to scale EdTech sustainability, telecommunications companies and digital service providers are at the center of implementation, working with governments to ensure connectivity and device inclusivity. Without these partnerships, even the best EdTech solutions risk remaining inaccessible, especially in low connectivity or rural areas. Effective public-private partnerships move national strategies beyond policy documents to practical implementation, while governments provide scale, regulatory direction, and enabling environments. Telcos and service providers contribute technical know-how, network architecture, data infrastructure, device ecosystems, cloud services, and platform integration. Together, they bridge high-level vision with day-to-day classroom realities. And this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa speaks to connecting African classrooms and how partnerships are changing the education game. We aim to surface actionable insights for policymakers, implementers, and ecosystem partners. Our panelists on this edition are Sylvia Mulinge, Chief Executive Officer, MTN Uganda; Bella Rigamba, the Digital Education Officer, Ministry of Education in Rwanda; Rachel Cooper, Digital Learning Specialist at UNICEF Kenya; and William Guru, who is the founder and CEO Kurasa. He's also a Mastercard Foundation EdTech Fellow 2024 cohort here in Kenya. It's good to have you all on this edition. And I guess the first question to ask us all is, what's your assessment of digital learning in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Uganda, and across Africa as a whole?
There's a lot of effort that has been done, both by, I think, government, by non-governmental organizations, and even by private sector.
Right.
But I see like there's a bit of challenge, particularly in the classroom, because you have devices divide where only some learners are able to have access to this kind of devices, internet. But also sometimes the challenge in setting up a whole learning experience, sometimes in class, means it takes a lot of time to set up, for a classroom. And so it's still a bit of challenge, but from the homes and elsewhere, I think a lot of these solutions are working. But again, you'll see that this is in urban centers, it's more in well-off homes, and still a lot needs to be done to reach, the far-flung areas. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we continue the work.
We've noticed a lot of the same things at UNICEF Kenya in terms of our implementation of digital learning programs. We recently developed a digital education strategy for UNICEF Kenya that really responds to a lot of the challenges that we've seen on the ground, including fragmented coordination and weak sustainability frameworks, including limited uptake of infrastructure due to limited connectivity, limited access to devices that work, limited skills, both of learners and teachers, especially digital skills, persistent inequalities and inequities in terms of access for marginalized learners, which for us is really our area of focus at UNICEF. And then, of course, negative perceptions and resistance to digital learning in communities. So really trying to combat those areas. Those are some of the key challenges that we've seen. And so in response, our EdTech strategy at the country level has 4 goals. The first is increasing equitable and inclusive access to quality education. The second is improving learning outcomes and employability. So really, connectivity not as a means to an end, but really contributing to those larger outcomes. Integrating EdTech in education and emergencies, including for refugee learners. So in Kenya, we look specifically at Turkana and Garissa counties to reach those learners, as well as other types of emergencies. And fourth, coordination and evidence generation. So really looking across partners and attempting not to duplicate efforts, but bring all our forces together.
A lot of the work has been done already. So if I take the example of Rwanda, so we've been working a lot on the infrastructure part. So for digital learning to actually happen, you need to have the infrastructure ready. That means connectivity in the schools, devices in schools and classrooms, but it's still work in progress. So although now we've been able to have close to 83% of the schools are connected, but now what we are looking at is the type of connectivity. So now we have challenges on the bandwidth. So they are connected, but for them to be able to use the different tools that are available for them, they need better connectivity, connectivity of a higher quality. That means also bigger needs, so more bandwidth. So I think it all starts, of course, with having, standards, putting our standards as the Ministry of Education, working on the policies. So within the education policy, we have that we need to enhance the use of technology into teaching and learning. So it's already part of the policy. Now, when you get into the strategies, EdTech strategy or digital transformation strategy for the education sector, that's when now you put in, some of the activities that needs to take place. So talked about the connectivity, we talked about devices, teachers training, content creation. Technology is not there to just replace the existing processes, but it's there as an enabler to get better education.
Sylvia, what do you make of digital learning across Africa? We've heard from William and Rachel as well as Bella, but what do you think?
I think it's a mixed bag of results. So first of all, from an awareness perspective, we have seen the acceleration that has been there on the African continent around the power of digitization, and especially this is being fueled by young people who are digital natives. They were born when the internet was already existing, so they know how to navigate themselves on the internet. They know the power of digital. And I think they are challenging us every day to begin to think around how do we deliver quality education without being bound by the geographical, either by geographical limitations or that you have to be in a brick and mortar kind of a space to be able to get learning. So from an awareness perspective, I think that has really done well. But if you look really at the progress, I would say it's moderate, and it's also very uneven. Those who have access really have good access, right? And the access is determined by whether they have access to infrastructure, they can be able to afford the internet, they know they have digital literacy, they have teachers who understand the power of leveraging digital to deliver learning. And then there's also then a really big bunch of people who, while they know about digital because they're on Facebook, they're on TikTok, they use it for their own personal spaces, they have not been able to translate the same advantages to learning simply because they don't have access to the infrastructure. So I think limited access to internet, to devices, to trained teachers are the things that are probably holding us back. So that's why I say the progress is moderate but uneven. Moderate because we can say we have made progress, but uneven because it's not equal across the economic strata of the different type of customer profiles we have. But also there's so many other kind of levers that we need to work on if we are truly to unlock the power of digital learning for all Africans, for all Ugandans.
My next question to you is, what technical trade-offs do you face in expanding connectivity to low bandwidth areas, or maybe even rural areas that are most times considered marginalized areas, and how can partnerships overcome them?
So first of all, we need to have an environment that from a government policy perspective that supports this, and government saying we can be able to reach more people, create more access, and therefore have the right frameworks that then encourage investment, right? Because this has to be a joint, can I say, solutioning that we have to come up with. So all the different ecosystem players, the guys who created educational content, us who are responsible for delivering the connectivity, the device manufacturers who either deliver tablets or give us smartphones where the content is consumed, and then also the regulator in terms of figuring out how do they allow a lot more participation by rewarding and creating the right incentives that then drive the investment. Because if you think about it, the trade-offs are not easy. You're asking, and it's not even for rural, but just, I mean, probably geographies that are probably not very well covered. Yeah, probably many of them will be rural. I guess that makes sense. But they'll have limitations in terms of coverage. They'll have limitations in terms of capacity. So I want to probably download video content because I want to learn visually or experientially, and the bandwidth and the spectrum investment comes with a cost. So how do we balance that off? And then also the cost to the end user, the person who's going to be consuming the content. So are we giving the educational content for free, or do they have to pay for it on a subscription model? Who pays that cost, right? Because there's a cost of the content aggregation, the packaging it into the different curricula, and then availing it. And then obviously the data costs. So balancing coverage, capacity, and cost, I think is one of the biggest challenges that we have. And increasingly, as customers become a lot more educated, they are now demanding higher speeds. They are demanding that regardless of where I am, everywhere I go in this country, I want to have the same quality of experience. And for that, then, for us as telco providers, we have to begin to think about how do we then meet the customer expectation, but do it in a way that is realistic from an economic perspective. So what are the options that are available in terms of delivering the infrastructure? The other thing, of course, with delivering infrastructure, you also need to have power. So are these customers on the grid? Are they not on the grid? That's what I'm saying. It has to be a collaboration in a wider ecosystem to ensure that we deliver this. So partnerships are critical. Governments, in terms of providing the policy environment, are critical. Development partners, such as yourself, are critical in terms of driving the overall digital inclusion agenda and also driving the investment. We have been having conversations around how do we get a lot more penetration in terms of smartphones, right? And somebody has to be willing to put in the money, and all of us have to play our role if we have to move this inch forward. So it's not the responsibility of one person, it's the responsibility of us all, and everybody has to hold their inch. And the accumulation of those inches, individual inches, is what will deliver the progress that we seek.
And I think that's a good way to come in, William, because your solution is pretty much teacher system centered.
Correct.
What gaps have you identified that you think public-private partnerships are trying to fix? And tell us how you think PPPs can be able to support the entire education ecosystem.
Actually, when you look at teachers, they actually are already using solutions that they like and they feel are supporting them within their own ways, whether it's on their phones, using their own bundles, which ideally shouldn't be the case, but they see the value and they actually go ahead and use this. And this already tells you that some of the tools that are out there for EdTech are already steps ahead of us. I'll give you an example. You have this, I will say, illicit websites, or whatever you will call it. From a government perspective, they are not compliant, but they sell lesson plans online. And you see that a lot of them are able to make a lot of milestones. Nobody knows what they do. Nobody knows them. And teachers really love and understand. And it's very easy for a teacher to recommend this website to somebody else.
Right.
And they spend their own money to actually buy this lesson plan. So these are examples of things that if we can very well understand the whole rationale around how teachers accept solutions, because we have a bunch of solutions that have actually complied with government or have funding or have very good reviews, and we have enough studies and even a pilot that has proven that it's a good thing. But when it comes to the classroom, the teacher has to make the final decision as to whether I'm going to use it tomorrow.
Right.
So that's a very big research point, and we continue to work around this to understand their motivations, because again, if it works for them, it's usually a no-brainer. We
Right.
don't even need to explain. So one of the things is WhatsApp. I think WhatsApp has a very good scalability and reach. And also you have these other small time, I think, links and online websites, among other things, social gatherings of whether it's teacher welfare groups and all these kind of things. I feel like this could also give us some headway into how they want to adopt solutions for their lives and
Right.
understanding more about what they really need.
Kurasa is an EdTech solution that is specific to system transformation for both the parents and the teachers. But let's listen in to what exactly it does and how it's transforming how services are being delivered in schools by both the teachers, the parents, and the educators themselves.
The challenges, especially as a parent, I was getting is knowing on how my child is progressing in the school, because I had to wait until the end of the term to go and talk one-on-one with the teacher or to get the report and then ask questions from the teacher. I'm really happy with what the Kurasa is doing for us parents. We are able to know our children, how they are progressing in the school. In the course of the week, I'm able to go to call the teacher or to go and discuss my child progress as per the strand or substrand in the school. Before Kurasa was introduced in Grinya Junior School, we used to get our reports of our children through a booklet. Kurasa has really improved me as a parent positively, especially in part of my child learning progress, learning involvement of all the activities he's doing in school. And one of the things I've loved of Kurasa, it is a modern way of doing things. It has really involved us as a parent. I can access it anywhere, anytime, and I'm able to know what my child is doing in school.
Now it was kind of hard for the teachers in preparing the MacBooks and recording the learners' marks, having a track of the same. It has become easy for us because we are able to assess learners individually per lesson. But previously, we were only assessing learners summatively, maybe in one exam like EdTerm or Opener or Midterm. So it has also become easy for me to also see exactly what the teachers are doing on the ground. Previously, they would tell you, oh, I have done this, but checking on the ground, they have done nothing. But this one, I am able to check. I am also to get back the track and see exactly whatever they are telling me that they have done is exactly what they have done.
At first, before we were introduced to Kurasa program, we had issues of keeping records, even marking the registers, even doing other works which directly involved her teacher. Kurasa has really of great help, especially in lesson planning, skilling, and even assessments.
Yeah, so the MasterCard Foundation EdTech Fellowship has been very useful for us and for Kurasa in particular, because being able to interact with they're actually 12, but they're condensed to 9 teams across investing, finance, across communication, community. All these teams have engaged with us very meaningfully, and they have really helped us to understand, first of all, where we are. So it's like we've had a chance to do a good audit of, where are we? Do we have proper policies? Do we have good structures? And then now take the time to plan for where do we want to be. And this has been very, very great. One of the things that really impacted us from being with the fellowship is ensuring that we are documenting beneficial use of our product by teachers and also by parents, trying to draw a line between what we are doing and what are the success metrics of these people, not for our own benefit, but for their own benefit, whether it's for the improvement of teaching and learning or also better learning outcomes.
To be able to deliver these services, I believe there's an element of data and connectivity that is required in the back end to ensure that there's seamless connectivity for those using the solution. William, how are you ensuring that this is happening seamlessly?
So when it comes to internet connectivity, which is something that we are trying to design for, most of Kurasa currently is text-based, and we're trying to keep it as light as possible to make it easier to access. However, a lot of those areas don't have as good quality connections as we would desire, and so you still find that even with a solution that's designed for low bandwidth, they would still have some challenges, and still trying to do the mix of offline and online, and sometimes it can be a challenge, especially when you still want them to have the correct data at all times, because offline usually relies on the last time that you connected. So one of the things that I think would be very useful for us is to have some form of zero rating for our users, in such a way, like I think Wikipedia is in one of that, is such a category, such that it becomes should I say, an instant buy for both parents and for teachers, because there are many schools we go, and right now it's becoming a thing where they will be like, we need to install internet first before we can take on your product. And you see that then creates a barrier of adoption. But something as basic as zero rating the service, and we're able to see how that can, again, boost access by schools and also by parents.
Bella, if I come back to you for this particular question, how can we make sure that we are aligning, let's say for the low connectivity areas, what measures do governments come and put in place, or are there guidelines you will give and say, if this connectivity or this solution does not meet certain connectivity threshold, then these are the standards that we expect from you. How does that usually go from a creator's perspective interacting with the government, or a developer's perspective interacting with the government?
Yes, we ask them to do, options of online and offline. But as William said, in some cases, you don't want it to be offline because you need real-time data. Then it becomes a challenge. So the other option is to see how these tools can be zero rated. I think this was also mentioned, talked about the partnership of UNICEF and Airtel, and the fact that it's global. It's actually in Rwanda too. And in Rwanda, we've been able to, Airtel has been able to connect 261 schools. So this helps in terms of getting connectivity to the school and not really limiting our innovators in terms of building things that are just for offline mode. Of course, whenever it's possible, we can have the offline mode, but even if it's offline, at some point, it will need connectivity. So again, we don't just want to have things that are completely offline, because that's not where we want to go. Now we are thinking of AI. I mean, you cannot just build things that will stay always offline. So we need to do more work into actually capacitating the schools to get better connectivity through partnership with the telcos, for example. So you have the partnership with the Airtel through UNICEF, but we also have currently a partnership with the MTN, where we are looking into zero rating some national platforms. So all those different partnerships are the ones that are going to support. But of course, some of the standards, always we ask them to, build things that will be able to be used in a very low bandwidth, and in some cases, based on also the type of the tool that we want to have, it will definitely or not always work.
Are there particular measures you put in place to ensure that these donor financed cycles are more long-term and not short-term? Because, usually it's like a trial period or a piloting period, and then after that, maybe one of the partners drops off. But how do you, as government, ensure that these partnerships are long-term?
Of course, I mean, partnership always have a certain period. But what we're trying to do is always to make sure that digital education is part of national budgets. So you could have partnership for, piloting, for proof of concepts, and
But you need to be able, whenever, and it has to be in the design, that whenever everything is ticked and we actually sure that this is a product that we want and we want to scale, you need to make sure that you understand how you're going to sustain it and where the finances are going to come. So from the design phase already, you only scale something that you will be able to sustain. So if you start trying to scale something, but you don't have a vision of where it will be in the next 5 years without a partner or the next 10 years, that means it's already not a product to scale. So it's always into the design itself. We only pilot things that we know at some point we will be able to scale.
I like that, scale what is sustainable. You also did mention something important about embedding digital learning in the national budgets. Is that already happening in Rwanda? Probably a lesson the rest of Africa can learn?
Yes, it is. I mean, from the Ministry of Education, it also has different agencies under the Ministry of Education. But all these different agencies, the ones that are in charge of basic education, the ones in charge of TVET or the higher education, they all always have a budget for digital. So that means this budget is the one that they use to buy devices for the schools. It's the budget that they use for the maintenance of these devices, for payment of connectivity bandwidth to the service providers. Sometimes it's also looking to, teacher training in ICT or, digital skills. So of course, we also do have partners that support that because sometimes the budget is not enough. So whatever other project that comes in that can support them to get more devices, it's helpful. But because you already have a line within your budget, then it's even easier to get this support because it just comes in, plugged into your national budget. So yes, we make sure that we have, digital education or digital learning part of the national budget, but I mean, priorities are always a lot of them. So we really do need the partnership to be able to reach where we want to go. Yeah.
Sylvia, if I just come back to you, how can telcos collaborate with governments, or how are you even collaborating with governments and other service providers to design device ecosystems and platforms that are affordable and adaptable no matter the environment, given the African context and our education ecosystems?
There have been a lot of engagements that we've had with the different stakeholders. Right now, we're having conversations with government around looking at the cost of devices. I mean, we all know what's happening globally with the rising cost of chipsets, which is therefore placing a heavier burden on the end user, who is the customer, in terms of getting a device. So we are having conversations around how do we provide device financing, right? How do we accelerate that? But we're also asking government, even as we hold our inch in terms of providing more affordable kind of models that allow customers to be able to access these devices based on their earning cycles. Can we also try and look at what is the taxation that is on these devices at an entry level, especially for entry level devices? We're not asking for relief for all smartphones. We're asking for the entry level customer who wants to switch over from 2G to 4G. How do we provide them with a decent experience that allows them then to be able to consume the content that they need of a device, that delivers for them a good experience. So that conversation is happening. Conversations with so that's from a device ecosystem. But over and above that, we also need to think about the content that will be consumed. So how do we then partner with institutions that are EdTech companies that bring then the innovation and the learning platform so that content then creates, utility for the device, right? Because at the end of the day, we are also trying to make sure that we are driving usage, right? There are conversations around how do we drive digital literacy? How do we enhance digital skills? So there's a lot that we do. Like, for example, through our foundation, we have the MTN Internet Bus that goes around the country, providing just awareness of basic digital skills so that when I get access to that device, I know what it is that I can do with it. We also have a lot of ICT labs that we're setting up across the country
in schools, especially rural and really consumer segments that have been largely unserved, so that we make sure that we leave no one behind. And I think the understanding that we now have is that the more that we keep thinking ecosystem, we allow a lot more harmonization. That harmonization results in integration. And that integration then means that we are constantly seeking to accelerate the value that you're offering, so that it's not just about the internet or the device, but it's also about all the other user services that are sitting on top of it, depending on the different kind of target customer you're talking to. So when you're talking to a university, what can you be able to offer to them that enables and empowers their learning versus a rural school? At the end of the day, it's providing access, but also making sure that we customize the solutions and the offering that we're delivering to those that we're giving access to, so that they can be able to reap the maximum utility from the product or service that they're consuming from us.
That's interesting. William, what kind of support do you need, say, in developing your EdTech solutions that you think if you had this support, you'd be able to reach an even wider market or consumer market in this case for your solution in the schools?
Without goodwill, you still struggle to get things working. I'll give you an example. When you go into a school and you are able to sell and perhaps explain yourself and everything, you still find that something is still there lacking. And this is very common in education. Even when the solution that you've offered, and even if it is internet, you'll still find that there's other certain aspects that always don't work. Now, where am I going with goodwill? Sometimes I feel like part of this goodwill is kind of political goodwill.
Right.
Because all we need is just a way that shows that, okay, we know that this is something that also has political goodwill. And when you look at Kenya, a lot more has been achieved with political goodwill than even with good policy. For instance, I think in Kenya, we are talking about hiring. I think we've already hired, 70,000. And the government is talking about another, I don't know how many, 60,000 before the end of the year, and so on and so forth. So this is the kind of, I think, partner support that perhaps needs to be inclusive, where you kind of have everybody. And I feel like that's perhaps the only missing link. There's a tight balance between impact and sustainability. And especially for entrepreneurs, you will see that you have to report on impact, on outcomes. And this fixation on outcomes, when we look at the cost and the amount of effort that it takes to actually turn these outcomes, you see that the cost per learner is a lot of the times very high. And when you look at our other, let me say, predominant competitors, people who sell basic things like textbooks, for instance, booksellers, and even there's local authors who sells books. They don't really focus much on outcomes, really, but they're able to really run sustainably. And we're trying to have a two-way engagement platform that is both efficient, scalable, and also is able to measure outcomes. So I think that could be a support in the form of maybe some form of capital that allows that kind of trade-off. Then the last thing I think, and this is what we were also having a discussion around, being able to coalesce our voices as startups or as entrepreneurs into something that's a bit maybe organized, I would say, that then allows Kurasa to be able to voice, because our concerns are quite similar in nature as startups.
Rachel, if I might come to you now, from the work that you do as digital learning officer, what do you think is the best approach that is working at the moment? And how are you leveraging these partnerships to improve digital learning in the space that you're practicing in?
In Kenya, we're connecting 1,000 schools to the internet and really looking at doing that in a scalable and sustainable way. And I should say the short-term goal is 1,000 schools. Of course, as you shared also, that's a drop in the bucket in terms of the number of schools that need to be connected, but that's where we're starting and growing from there. And I think the sustainability elements will help to improve the scalability as well. So as part of that, UNICEF advocated with the government of Kenya to allow for school capitation grants to support recurring school connectivity costs, recognizing that donors and partners shouldn't be stepping in for a short period and then just allowing the project and the connectivity to drop after that, which we often see as the case. So really embedding that within the school's planned expenses as well through the capitation grants. I think also the private sector has played a key role in this as well. And through the last mile connectivity of schools project, UNICEF has supported some market shaping around that. And in some schools, we've seen that the connectivity costs, the monthly recurring costs, have dropped up to 60% due to increased competition in that space as well. So that's been really critical for sustainability.
And as we bring this conversation to a close, looking ahead, what does a gold standard partnership for connecting African classrooms look like, really? And this is a question to all of us, Sylvia, Bella, as well as Rachel and William.
I think it's what we've spoken to is how do we bring the entire digital ecosystem together? As we say in Africa, it takes a village, right? So it takes the village that is made up of the content creators, the government, the regulators, ourselves, the students, or the content consumers, if I may call them so. The EdTech companies that are then developing the right, platforms with the easy to use UIs, for people, so to make it easy for customers to be able to navigate, us providing the connectivity and great experience. So I think when we all partner together, right, that really kind of raises the water level for everybody and ensures that as we all raise our game in this, everybody also who's participating in this ecosystem is also able to accelerate. So, we could do something in the short term, but for it to be truly scalable and sustainable, it has to be an ecosystem effort. So I think that partnership for progress is what because all of us are great in what we do, but how do you bring all the different elements of great into something that is bigger than all of us? Everyone then also being accountable for that which they are delivering to make this and even this even greater thing that we are all building together. That for me, that level of collaboration, that level of ownership, that level of joint, synergy in terms of delivering the bigger picture is what I would call my gold standard, because it's not easy to achieve.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of elements that come into play with that, gold standard. But I think for me, the thing that comes most prominently to mind is bringing out the experiences of the most marginalized and making that visible to those in power and to those with decision-making power, also to the private sector, to ensure that sort of those interests converge and coalesce into reaching the most marginalized learners. Because when we can reach the most marginalized learners, everything else is easy. And so one example of UNICEF's work around this area is supporting the government of Kenya and specifically Semestea on the virtual science lab model, which is currently being scaled up nationally. About 5 or 6 years ago, UNICEF started a pilot on virtual science labs in Kakuma refugee camp and the surrounding host communities, and Dadaab refugee camp and surrounding host communities there as well, with really looking at the challenge of not having enough physical science laboratories. Now with the competency-based curriculum and competency-based education, with that being a requirement to have physical labs and to have that experience with physical labs, trying to reach learners where they are. And so looking at some of those more marginalized communities in Turkana and Garissa, providing them with virtual science labs, which were available offline first, given what the context was at the time. They didn't have sustainable school connectivity, not even sustainable electricity to support that. So working on an offline model. Last year, we invited members across some of the semi-autonomous government agencies under the Ministry of Education to visit our model in Kakuma to help inform that national scale up. So bringing in Ministry of Education, bringing in Semestea, bringing in KICD for curriculum development, bringing in ICTA as it very much relates, of course, to school connectivity as well, to show them what we had built and how that could inform the national scale up. And as a result, those lessons have been used for head teacher training, which is now scaled to, I think, about 9,000 or so subjects level teachers across the country. And it's also those lessons are being utilized with other partners as well across the 47 counties in Kenya to inform the national scale up.
I think for me, the teachers still remain to be the choke point, the neck of the funnel. And so I think if we're able to have teachers, I think for me, it's a very good teacher pathway, CPD model that actually works so that you're able to measure, you're able to, let me say, improve their careers by doing all this. Because yes, we have our focus on the learners, which is great, but I feel like teachers must not feel like we're trying to bypass them to just assist the learners.
Yeah.
They should feel honored, they should feel part of the process. And thus, I think everything else will have much greater access and success.
Bella, over to you on what exactly that gold standard partnership would look like.
We need to look into a teacher-centered implementation for whatever initiative. Because as he said, they are the ones that needs to adopt it first, even if we are building for the learners, but they are the ones that needs to adopt it for it to actually be used. So focusing on the students directly is not the best approach because you need to get to the student through the teachers. So they need to be the one that, the first focus. Then we also need to make sure that the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure is going to be able to implement this. So we need to look into sustainability. So not looking into things that will not fit within the existing infrastructure. So of course the existing infrastructure can be, bettered. But then if you start thinking of what you want to, how you want this infrastructure to be in the next 10 years and you try to implement something now, it won't work. So you need to fit with the already existing infrastructure as much as possible. And I think maybe then on the ministry level is to have proper regulations, and also making sure that everything is coordinated. We talked about the fact that, you have different agencies that are doing different things. I think that as a ministry, then you need to be able to coordinate everything so that you don't ask your partners that are already supporting you or the EdTech ecosystem that is there to support you to go around not really knowing who to talk to. So as a ministry, we need to make sure that we are able to do some coordination or at least better inform our partners of the routes to take. And then it's something that is clear. So you know that from A you go to B and then to C, not leaving them to, going into several places that takes things, makes things, take longer to be implemented. I think those are the ones that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this edition and quite a deep conversation here, zero rating for users. I think that was the big one from William, for it to be able to make sense to his solution as a developer of an EdTech solution, but then also really looking into where the teacher's place is throughout this process and ensuring that the infrastructure that is put in place also meets the standards of these different countries that we are working around or that we are partnering with to change the education system. A lot as well has been spoken about the national budgets by Bella, incorporating digital learning in the national budgets as well, and ensuring that we are scaling what's sustainable and not the other way around, which is really quite important. Those 4 goals that came from UNICEF in terms of inclusive education, improving learner outcomes, integrating EdTech in the wider education ecosystem, and then coordination and evidence, I think those really are some of the bigger issues that we need to prioritize. And this, of course, is in addition to the infrastructure question that we are always going to ask about what it's going to take to fix it. and connectivity being one of the bigger issues that really support this digital learning infrastructure as well. Thank you all so much for joining us in this edition. And that's about it that we had for you in this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. Until the next one, bye-bye for now.